Hello and welcome to the latest episode of IMTV. I'm your host for tonight, Adam Booth, the editor of Socialist.net. Socialist.net is the website of Socialist Appeal, the British section of the International Marxist Tendency, and it's the International Marxist Tendency that brings you IMTV. And on our previous episodes, we've been interviewing comrades, Marxist activists from across the world in Pakistan and Italy, in Britain, in America. And tonight we're going to be discussing with Ben Morken, who's an IMT comrade and activist in South Africa. We're going to be talking about the situation in South Africa and also across the continent of Africa, about the coronavirus crisis and its impacts on the country there. Just a reminder that you can follow us on all our social media channels, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and you'll get regular updates and episodes of IMTV and links to articles from Marxist.com. Now, without further ado, then, I will bring in Ben on the line if I can. Ben, hello there. Can you hear us okay?
Hi, I can hear you, Adam. Good to be with you.
Nice to see you. Nice to have you on the program tonight. Now, as I just said to viewers, you're an IMT activist in South Africa, and I'm just going to bring up an article on Marxist.com that you wrote quite recently about the coronavirus crisis in Africa and the impact of imperialism, the devastating effect of imperialism and the coronavirus combined on the continent of Africa. Could you begin today by just telling us a little bit about how the coronavirus crisis has affected the whole of the continent?
Yeah, sure, Adam. Well, at this stage, it would seem that as we look at the continent as a whole, we haven't seen the same effect as we've seen in Britain or Europe, United States, or China. Now, obviously, in Africa, the problem is that the figures, the statistics, the figures on testing and tracing and so on are not readily available. The case has been in the more advanced capitalist countries. But from looking at the wider picture of the African continent, it would seem that the virus has not reached the same devastating levels as it has yet, as it has reached in Europe and elsewhere. And I would say that the main reason is that the continent doesn't get the same amount of international travelers as anywhere else. Also, the transport sectors are not as developed. You know, some countries like Central African Republic doesn't even have an internal bus network or a railway network of internal flights and so on. So that's basically the main reason for why the figures are so low at this stage. But that will change in the coming months or so.
Okay, thank you, Ben. And in South Africa explicitly, then, what has been the situation over the last couple of months? I hear there's been quite a brutal lockdown in terms of the police presence on the streets and the way in which people have been kind of forced into their homes. Can you expand on that a bit and explain exactly what the lockdown looks like in South Africa?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the most severe lockdowns in the world. They've basically deployed the entire military in the streets. Um, at this stage, the army, well, the armies are also providing social services like ferrying water tanks and building infrastructure, modifying stadiums, football stadiums, etc., to accommodate patients and so on. But the bulk of the army and the police are doing law enforcement, basically keeping people, especially the people in the townships, in the slums, in the poorer sections of the country, to basically keep them in the area where they're living in, and they're not going out into the suburbs and more wealthy areas and so on. So from that perspective, it is a very hard lockdown. And of course, it has political ramifications. You know, this South Africa has a history of the military in the townships from the apartheid days and so on. It's a very political it's political dynamite actually to have the military operate like this in the townships for for a long period of time. So yeah, so from that point of view, it's this bubbling discontent in the townships with the hard military presence in those areas.
And what does it look like in terms of economically? You know, what has been the impact of the lockdown on workers, on the poorest layers of South African society, and what kind of situation do you see in the healthcare system?
Yeah, well, if you look at the and let's talk about the healthcare system. I think one of the just look at the figures. I mean, we don't it doesn't have the same levels as Britain with 30,000 deaths. I mean, the death toll only stands at something like 100, close to 150 at this stage. So the lockdown partly has meant that the figures are not as high as that, but economically it's had a devastating effect. I mean, the informal workers, precarious workers, and so on, have been absolutely ruined. Millions of people are basically without already lived on the edges of starvation and on hunger, are
Mm-mm.
basically being deprived of making a livelihood to feed their families and so on. And also in the formal economy, they're expecting something like 7 million jobs to be lost this well in the next period. And in informal sector, it could be anything like 5 million jobs. And I mean, this is on top of a very high unemployment rate in any ways. So this just compounds the economic misery that the working class, especially the poorer sections in townships, in the shanties and the squatter camps in these places, is been devastating to it's just compounding the economic misery that they've been under in this period.
And what about at the top of society? What's happening with big business? Are they continuing to profit? Are they carrying on, living their extravagant lifestyles?
Yeah, well, they have come up with a social relief package, right? But that has been basically a disguise to bail out big business at this stage. I mean, they've come up with a 500 billion rand package to deal with the coronavirus, and only
Mm-mm.
10% goes to social spending. The bulk of that and the funds that they have set aside are actually to help business over the long term, and have put in short term measures for ordinary people who have suffered job losses and so on. But they have shut down the economy, so the mines are not operating except coal mines and so on, except for the first 5 weeks, and then after big business to really start to demand that the economies start to open up again, and that's what we are seeing now is a gradual softening of the lockdown, basically on demand of big business.
So the lockdown, it started to subside about a week ago now, last Friday, if I'm not incorrect. And you're saying that is mainly because of the pressure of the big capitalists who want to get the economy going and the profits flowing. Is that right?
Absolutely. There was this major this professor Abdul Karim. He's a top scientist. He's been advising the government. And he was suggesting just before the lockdown was softened that it actually need to continue at level 5. There's 5 levels of it. Actually need to continue with level 5 for a period for a longer period, but that was overruled by the government when they they softened the lockdown to level 4, and that was basically on the behest of big business when they start making noise, when they start demanding that the economy should reopen. And so we have seen mines gradually starting to go back. Mine workers have been called up and so on. Well, without really offering real protection to workers. I mean, one of the unions, the mining unions, the Association of Mine Workers Construction Union, had to go to court to order the government to put in measures to protect workers when they go back to work. And so it's not from that point of view. It's a real struggle for, and of course South Africa is a big mining industry, and thousands of workers working thousands of kilometers underground. So it would be a disaster if this virus was spread in the mines and so on. So it was very, very, very careless to open the mines just like that from the government's point of view. And you see that when the unions start to fight back, they have managed to put in some measures to protect workers.
And you said that these kind of attacks on workers, this kind of these impacts of the coronavirus crisis, come on top of an existing kind of economic crisis within South Africa and the economy there. Can you explain a little bit what the situation was like economically in South Africa before the coronavirus hit?
Yeah, absolutely. When the coronavirus hit, the economy was already in recession. Actually, there's been 3 recessions in the last 15 years. So it's actually a deep slump in the economy for more than a decade now, and the economy has barely grown above or just below 1% for more than 10 years. And yeah, so it's been the economy is really not recovered from the 2008 financial crisis. It's been dragging on for the last 10 years, and unemployment as a result of this has shot up to about nearly 30%. That's the official figures. Of course, on a broader definition, it's much higher. And in terms of numbers, it's already just over 10 million unemployed. So it's been a devastating impact economically for the last decade. And so this coronavirus crisis will only compound this misery for the working class and for the poorer layers of society. It will have a major devastating impact. First of all, for precarious workers, but secondly, even for the formal economy, they project like 7 million job losses in the coming period.
Thank you very much, Ben. I just wanted to say also that we've got viewers writing in on the comments on Facebook and YouTube with people saying they're watching in Cape Town and elsewhere across the world. So just to let you know, this is a live broadcast and you can write in questions in the comments to Ben, and we should have some time for those towards the end of the interview. But just coming back then, Ben, to the situation in South Africa, as you said, this crisis, this pandemic comes on top of existing tensions politically, economically within South Africa, and politically, it's particularly the case that the regime, the Ramaphosa government, has had a continuation of this political crisis of the ANC that started under Zuma as well. And can you just explain then a little bit about the political situation as a result of the crisis now? Is Ramaphosa becoming more popular, or is he becoming more discredited? In other countries, like in Brazil, and you've seen a massive political crisis in Britain as well, with Bolsonaro and Boris Johnson. They've become massively unpopular as a result of this crisis and the way they've handled it. Have you seen something similar with Ramaphosa in South Africa, or is he kind of riding a wave of so-called national unity?
Yeah, absolutely. For him, the virus actually a boost, because just before the pandemic hit, his grip on the ANC, on the ruling party, was actually slipping very fast. So when this virus came, he could project himself as a man of speaking in an even tone. He addresses the nation seriously. He put in place the measures to protect us, as he sees it, to protect the nation from this virus. And so, yes, yeah, over the short term, yes, there's been a boost in his standing. Now, obviously, the picture is obviously more complicated because people are now starting to differentiate between him and the rest of the ANC. So, just prior to this crisis, the ANC was already in desperate crisis. It's been covering the country for the last 26 years on a capitalist basis. That means attacking living standards of the workers, uh, and none of the problems of the previous period of the apartheid regime has been solved. The working class still live in desperately poor conditions, and actually things like unemployment and inequality have worsened under the ANC government. So people are seeing. Depends on which ANC you look at. There's a massive split in the party, right? It's barely the ruling class is holding the party basically together for a lack of an alternative. They're unlike Britain or anywhere else. They don't have a second party to move to give power to. So they're basically stuck with the ANC. And the longer it stays in power, the more rotten it becomes, the more corrupt it becomes. And it takes all the crisis of the capitalist system on its shoulders, and it's rotten from the inside, basically. Massively, it's corrupt from the inside. It's even in this pandemic crisis, there's a massive support of massive shenanigans going on with food partial distributions. People are favoring their comrades, their faction in the ANC as opposed to the others, and so giving friends and family and so on. So the party is really rotten from the inside, but it's like a zombie being kept alive by the ruling class for because I say there's really no alternative for them, and just dragging this stench of this corpse for as long as they can to keep the whole situation together.
That's a very good description, I think, a very vivid one. And could you explain a little bit more about what Ramaphosa's leadership represents? Because when he came in, he was supposedly going to be this kind of liberal savior who would get rid of corruption that was, as you say, kind of endemic within the ANC under Zuma. And there's obviously like this kind of factional struggle going on. So what does Ramaphosa represent within this struggle, and what has he actually been able to do in reality compared to a lot of the praise that's heaped upon him?
Yeah, Ramaphosa is the candidate of big business. He has a long association with big business. Comes from his days as a negotiator. He was a chief negotiator at at negotiations to end apartheid with the former regime. So they have close links with big business. He's used to meeting with them, discussing the issues from their point of view. He's also known as a great negotiator and so on. They kind of build him up like that. And so he's the candidate of big business. The other faction is a upstart bourgeoisie, a very thin layer of black capitalists, which use the ANC and the state apparatus to promote themselves to and to gain entrance into the economy, which is dominated by the old guard of the ruling class, the old established traditional white bourgeoisie. So the negotiations to end apartheid, which is called the Codesa negotiations, basically made a deal, right? So the state power would go to the ANC elite, and the economy would remain the same in the hands of the old guard, right? And so Ramaphosa is actually representing the interest of big business, as opposed to the Zuma faction, which is formerly known as the Zuma faction, or the other faction, which is more the more upstart capitalists, the new money capitalists, the guys who are just coming up now with using the state to enrich themselves through tender fraud basically looting the state resources to enrich themselves.
Yeah, and I guess this brings us on to the question of the opposition then, because in the last period, we've seen the rise of the EFF in particular, the Economic Freedom Fighters around Malema, and they've been conducting quite a lot of agitation in Parliament against Ramaphosa and before that against Zuma. So, what are they saying now amidst this crisis? What kind of demands have they? Well, first of all, what kind of demands have they been putting forward in Parliament and on the streets in the last few years? And what are they saying now in relation to defending the masses in this particular crisis?
Well, the situation has changed with the EFF. I think that for the first 3 years of its existence, it was very militant, very radical. Projected itself as an anti-establishment, fighting Ramaphosa. Famously, when they came into power, they called him out for his participation in the Marikana massacre, called him murderer, for his role in the events that led to the murder of mine workers in 2012 at the Marikana mine in Rustenburg. But this situation has changed over time. They have changed their position to Ramaphosa. They've given him critical support actually. So it's not that robust opposition that we saw in the first 2 years, the first 3 years. Now on the coronavirus crisis, actually they've failed to come up with a real alternative to the government. They have basically just reiterated the policies that the government has put in place, making some minor criticism here and there. And basically, Ramaphosa, known as the great negotiator, has actually made wide consultations before making any decision, and that it includes bringing in opposition parties. He briefs them on a regular basis, and whenever these measures, economic measures, or the measures to deal with the pandemic are made, it's usually after you've consulted with them. So in effect, you have nowadays an informal or an unofficial national government. Actually, that's what it comes down to. There's not the same robust opposition that you saw from the EFF in the first 3 years. They've become more left reformist, more Pan-Africanist, and moved slightly away from the more class elements, the more class criticism that they have made in the first 3 years of their existence.
And one of the things that they were quite famous for, if I'm not mistaken, was calling for nationalisation of the mines, which obviously is a very important demand in a country where mining makes up such a huge part of the wealth and the economy of the country. Is that still a main pillar of the program, or has that been diluted as well?
Well, it is. It's in their program, the nationalization of the mines, the banks, the monopoly industries, and so on. And precisely at this time, with the coronavirus crisis, which so graphically illustrates the failure of the capitalist system, and so graphically illustrates what is needed to be done, to end the rule of big business, to end the rule of the capitalist system, to come up with a real class-based alternative, to expropriate the economy, to put it under workers' control. To when the government open up the economy to allow the nearly 1.5 million workers back, including mine workers, into the mines, without providing real measures to protect workers. They've actually not made this demand. That was a perfect demand to come up with the demand for workers' control, that the workers should decide when the mines should be open. The workers should decide to put the workers in control of the mining operations, because the government has not done so. And so, as I said, they had to take the mining union to force the government to come up with these measures. So the demand for the nationalization of the mines, expropriation of the mines, like that word there, expropriation of the mines without compensation, because they don't deserve any compensation. They've been looting the country for more than 150 years, enriching themselves, and basically the lives of the mine workers have not improved any bit over this period. So the nationalization of the mines, the banks, the monopoly industries is a very concrete and a very applicable demand at this stage.
If anything, they should be compensating us, right, for all the money that they've stolen, as you say. And I mean us, I mean the labour movement, ordinary people, of course. Now, just to kind of bring things to the current day, then again, we were just before the pandemic. I know that there was that, in the previous years we'd seen some very fierce class struggles within South Africa amongst the youth with the Fees Must Fall campaigns, and amongst the unions and the working class more widely over inequality and wages and things like this. What's happened to those struggles in the previous period, and how do you think those kind of struggles will be affected by the pandemic? Will we see an eruption of the class struggle, do you think, in the months and years ahead in South Africa?
Yeah, you're right. Between 2009 and 2013, there was a massive eruption of the class struggle. We've seen waves of strikes, demonstrations, protests from different layers of the working class, one layer after another coming to struggle. It was also during this period where we had the uprising on the platinum belt, mine workers coming coming to the fore, the struggles of the mine workers coming to the fore. It was during this period that the Marikana massacre took place, when the government really lost control of the situation. That the militancy of the mine workers were so graphic and so big that they had to resort to a massacre to try to contain the situation. So that just shows the militancy that there was at this stage. Also, that was followed by other layers, as you say, students, fees must fall, and so on. It led to important victories and so on. But I think the main problem was that none of these demands were ever put together in a genuine program and promoted by any political party on the left to give that would deepen the struggle and lead to all these concrete demands be realized currently. As this left reformists have basically have done absolutely nothing to promote the struggle, to take it further. And of course, you cannot the working class cannot be kept in a state of white heat activism for a long period. So it has subsided, but it's not been defeated. South African working class have not been defeated since the 1960s, actually. So it's mainly an element of tiredness coming into the struggle, and so it's temporarily subsided. Absolutely, it will erupt at some stage, especially when the worst effects of the coronavirus crisis is over, which they actually just expect the peak to hit in September. So that will be the worst time of the pandemic. But after that, over a long period, over the medium period, especially if millions of workers have gone unemployed, their lives have been disrupted, because as Marxists we understand that it's not so much poverty that causes social eruption, but the changes in people's circumstances, when especially sudden changes, when millions of people have lost their job overnight, and they see it and they want to go back to the previous period, but they can't, and the system doesn't allow them to regain their jobs, to make a living, and so on. There will be a massive explosion among the South African working class, on a far higher level than anything we've seen in the history of the country.
Thank you, Ben. And I guess finally, flowing from that, then we go back to discussing what we began this conversation with, which is the role of imperialism across Africa. And you mentioned obviously the effects of the coronavirus are yet to be quite on the scale as elsewhere, but obviously the effects of imperialism are absolutely ravaging the continent. So can you just end tonight really by telling us about, how do we fight imperialism? How do we fight against these devastating effects of capitalism and imperialism in Africa and across the world? Because we're seeing statistics coming out, even from the bourgeois, saying that 265 million people across the planet are predicted to starve, not because there's not enough food, but because of this crisis disrupting food chains, disrupting distribution. Even though there's plenty enough food to feed 10 billion people, we're going to have 235 or 265 extra million on top of those already starving every day. And on top of that, there's other statistics showing that 1.6 billion workers, 50% of the world's workforce, will lose their livelihoods. People in these precarious jobs, in these kind of self-employed industries, and workers made unemployed by this crisis. So, can you just explain then? How do we organize the fight against capitalism and imperialism that is devastating Africa and the whole world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, imperialism is basically the reason why the African continent is in the state that it is. It's been kept underdeveloped by the imperialist forces deliberately to loot its resources and its labor and its workforce. Yeah, and so the I think for many people in the West, many people in Europe or Britain, the United States, this coronavirus crisis is a big shock. It's not used to things like that. But in Africa, epidemics are actually, it's actually pretty common. If you look at a place like the Democratic Republic of Congo, it's now suffering from the coronavirus pandemic. It's suffering from a measles epidemic, and it's suffering from Ebola, all at the same time. And measles is by far the most deadliest disease ravaging the country. And the thing is, measles is actually a vaccine, a very effective vaccine, in existence for more than 50 years. Actually. And it's really a scandal that today people are dying because of measles, things like measles. Even Ebola can be treated quite effectively. People die because they have weak immune systems. And yet, the reason why I have weak immune systems is because they can't afford food, they can't afford clean drinking water. People die because of things like diarrhea, which no one should die from that. That's a preventable death, and many of these deaths on the African continent are absolutely preventable. But the reason is that Africa does not provide a viable market for these pharmaceutical companies. That's why they can't vaccinate people for measles. Now you talk about coronavirus crisis, um, uh, coronavirus pandemic. I mean, if they can't solve the measles thing, how are they going to solve the coronavirus thing? So for years to come, the working class, the poor, the peasants of Africa will be ravaged by this new disease also. And obviously, the role of imperialism is devastating. It's led directly and indirectly to the current situation in the African continent. Now, what can be done? I mean, the this question will be answered by the revolutionary movements of the working class, especially of South Africa, Nigeria, and Egypt, which is the three biggest countries, the three key countries on the African continent. An eruption of the class struggle in any of these three countries could have major implications for the class struggle of the rest of the continent. A successful South African revolution would spread like wildfire throughout the African continent. One country after another will be affected by such a movement. South African working class has very militant traditions, very heroic history of struggle. It's they say it's not been defeated for the last or since the 1960s. It keeps coming. It keeps fighting. It has to fight for survival, and against the exploitation of imperialism and their local agents in South Africa and on the African continent. So the answer to what's to be done is find in the class struggle of the working class, and we need to be prepared. But first of all, as Marxists, we need to be trained and educated in the theories of Marxism and the practice of Marxism. I mean, to intervene in the class struggle of the working class, and to make links, especially with the most advanced layers of the working class, and to penetrate just deep roots into the working class. And only then can we come up with, also as Marxists, we have a complete program to complement the incomplete demands of the workers, to generalize all the demands that the workers have, and to lead the working class into struggle. So I would say that if anyone in South Africa or anyone in the African continent wants to get in touch, write to the Intervention Marxism website, or write to me at ben@marxist.co.za, and get involved in the class struggle. Get involved in Marxist education. We run regular reading groups, regular discussion groups. We on almost on a daily basis, so to train and educate ourselves in the ideas of Marxism, because the only solution to the working class is to overthrow the capitalist system and to fight for a socialist world order.
Thank you very much, Ben. I think that's an excellent place to end it for tonight. Thank you again for joining us on the programme. Thank you for all your answers, and obviously stay safe and healthy in South Africa, and hopefully we'll see you when the pandemic has subsided. See you once again. Thank you very much. Solidarity, comrade. And thank you to everyone at home who's been watching. As Ben said, if you want to get involved in the fight for revolution, in the fight for Marxist ideas across the world, for those watching in South Africa, across the world, write in at Marxist.com, and we will put you in touch with other Marxist activists and get you organised in the fight for Marxist ideas. And of course, we will be continuing this show, our programme, next Wednesday, same time, same place, and we will actually be discussing with comrades from the IMT in Nigeria. As Ben just said, Nigeria is a vital country in terms of the class struggle in Africa and in the whole world, and we'll be discussing with comrades there again about the coronavirus crisis and the general situation in terms of the class struggle in Nigeria. We'll be continuing this Friday as well with Alan Woods' series on the English Revolution, so tune in on Friday afternoon for more of that. And if you haven't already seen it, if you weren't watching live, go back and watch the IMT's May Day rally from last Friday with speakers from across the international Marxist tendency talking about the importance of workers' struggles and internationalism. That's about all for tonight. I'll see you again next Wednesday. In the meantime, check out Marxist.com, check out our YouTube channel and our Facebook for all the latest articles and videos. Stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you again next week.